Thanks for clicking on to the Saturday edition of Hogan's European Outlook. We are rapidly approaching the end of another year once again, and the weather is getting more and more interesting as we step towards the new year and beyond. Before we continue with the video, I want to say that we've got the final live stream of 2024 coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. It would be good to see you as we close out 2024 on the live chat. Leave a comment. I'll give you a shout out. I'll answer questions if I possibly can. So I'm hoping that there is a good turnout for the final stream of 2024 tomorrow. So that's 4 p.m. and I'll leave the link in the description below for that. Before we also look at the details with regards to the upcoming potential for rain, sleet, snow, gales as we move towards the Hogmanay period, let's have a quick look at the final latest run of the GFS Ensemble regarding the upper heights. So we know that pressure is going to start building over the Arctic region. That is going to then affect and disrupt the polar vortex. The modelling continues to see this very strong warming showing up end of week 1, end of week 2 of January. And essentially we're going to just look at that on a daily basis now, because it is worth paying close attention to what's going on, not only within the lower 18,000 feet, but also up towards the stratospheric level as well. So if we play it through, and this is looking down over the poles, so we've got North America here, and we've got a lot of positives over Eastern Canada, for example, extending towards the Baffin Straits, the western side of Greenland. We've got a negative over between Greenland and Iceland. We've got a lot of high pressure, if you notice, across Europe. Play it through the loop, and you notice that we start to see a change taking place. We've got these wave breaks taking place at 500 millibars, and that is going to start to change the overall synoptic pattern. We're going to start to see higher pressure building into Greenland, into the Arctic region, and that is going to allow for troughs to start developing over Eastern North America and over Western Europe as well. And continue to play through this. This is Friday the 3rd of January here. We've got this positive just in the south shore of Greenland. We've got a negative over Europe here. This would certainly suggest more north or even easterly flow developing over Europe as well. We've got a lot of positives now starting to show up as we move towards next weekend. Still a long way out, but this is the GFS Ensemble, which means it's the combination of all the members run together creates this blend and this overall idea. And there's reasonably good cross-model agreement now that we are seeing this return to a more negative Arctic oscillation, negative North Atlantic oscillation, troughs into Eastern North America and into Europe as well. And it's going to certainly turn more interesting. Now, I'm not a big fan of showing individual runs. I don't tend to post on either Facebook or Twitter individual model runs, because the modelling is chopping and changing all the time, and quite often people will throw these models out to get clicks and likes and whatever. So I try to avoid that, because one of the main stances I've got is to try and not hype things up. But this all makes perfect sense given what has been said since the beginning of winter, but also since the end of November when I released the forecast, that when you get that rotation back towards the phases of 7 or 8 of the Mann-Julian oscillation, look out for a change in the overall pattern. When you've got the warm phases, which we've seen through a good chunk of December, we had a warmer than average December. So I'm actually really pleased with how December has turned out, and it's also turning slightly colder as we move towards the final days of the month, which kind of coincides quite nicely with what I said. But I also wanted to emphasize that pinpointing a particular type of weather pattern weeks, even months in advance is near impossible. But the general thinking, the general ideas have been pretty sound up until now anyway. But certainly there is potential here, folks, without hyping this up, without getting over enthusiastic and carried away. There is reason to believe that this January could end up turning out pretty cold, given the overall situation that's taking place. Now, we've got one thing, which is the weakening of the PV due to the height rises over the Arctic region. That creates the frictional effect from troposphere up into the stratosphere. But what happens with that warming over the stratosphere? Is it a blip and it returns to a more solid, symmetric state where you've got this strong column of cold within the stratosphere extending into the troposphere? Or is it a more significant warming that leads to something bigger? In other words, a sudden stratospheric warming. These are questions that we still don't know, and only as we move towards the actual time frame, which is around between the 8th and the 12th of January, there is a very strong warming that takes place. Do we see an actual wave break within the stratospheric circulation that causes a reversal, a sudden stratospheric warming, a split? One piece going into North America, another piece going into Europe. If that happens, we could be in for some major cold and snow if that was to materialise. But again, these are all ifs, buts and maybes at this stage. We do not know. But notice here that as we continue to play through this loop, we've got this very, very conducive upper air pattern with strong positive Greenland extending into the Arctic region with a twin negative underneath here, either side of that positive, one over Eastern North America, the other over Europe. Let's have a quick look at the Europe view and see what the temperature anomalies are looking like in terms of the next couple of weeks or so. So let's go to the European view. Just bear with a second. Go back to the upcoming 5 days and notice here, again, we're still looking generally warmer than average. Remember, the cold air is slightly to the north of the British Isles over the next 5 days or so. But then as we move into the day 6 through 10, we're turning below average. And then even the 11 to 15 day, we're below average as well here. Not extreme, but colder than average nonetheless. And what may happen is if this is a more substantial cold, you tend to find the model turns colder and colder as we step forward here. Looking at the latest of the ECMWF with regards to the temperatures at 10 millibars, and you can see upcoming week, Monday 30th of December through the Monday the 6th of January, we've got the two areas of cold within the 10 millibar level, one over Asia, the other over the North Atlantic. Skip on the following week, and you can see the strong warming now starting to show up over the Asia and European side of the pole, colder anomalies across North America. Then as we move through into the period now between the 13th and the 20th, there's a lot going on within the stratosphere. Exactly what is going on, we will remain to be seen whether this is going to become anything significant going forward. But if this turns out to be a sun stratospheric warming, which I'm not saying it is, but if it did, we could be in for a much longer period of cold than what was forecasted here on marvoganweather.com. And then you notice that we've still got that warming taking place from the eastern side of Eurasia across the top of the pole into North America, Greenland, North Atlantic. This certainly is a very intriguing look. And even as we move all the way out, this is the way out to the 3rd through the 10th of February, we've got a warmer than average 10 millibar level over the entire pole, which is quite interesting to see. Looking at the mean zone of winds, according to the ECMWF latest, we've got this sharp drop off to around average, if you notice here. And all the members are really in good agreement of that, you notice here, because you've not got the big spread in the various runs. We've all tightly packed together, which means there's very good agreement of that. So we go from record strong, which we're still at the moment, to average. So we're not seeing this big drop below the climatological average, which is interesting. But also notice that we go back stronger than average, which is interesting. And this is the period now, towards the end of week 1 into week 2 of January, we'll see this recovery in the mean zonal wind, which is quite intriguing. Then another drop to slightly below average. This is obviously the thick blue line represents the ensemble mean. You've obviously got quite a spread between the various members here, some going stronger, some going weaker. So yeah, you have to kind of take that as it is. Looking at the latest GFS model run here, there's the current situation regarding the 10 millibar level. Play through the loop, you can see this very strong warming showing up here over Europe, Asia. You can see a core of bitterly cold conditions at minus 85 centered over Greenland here. Continue to play through, look at the stretching, look at the displacement of the vortex itself as that strong warming rotates across Eurasia. And then we see this core of bitterly cold conditions at minus 89, minus 90 Celsius, again over the North Atlantic and Greenland it's centred. And as that core of cold seen by the GFS model kind of swings close towards the UK, we may see some polar strat clouds developing overhead, which would be quite interesting. But look at the strong warming that is really noticeable here as we move towards the end of week 1, beginning of week 2 of January. And like the other model showed a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, should I say, we see a little bit of a bend in the vortex structure, which suggests it's like the warming is trying to split the polar vortex by pushing the warming in between and then splitting the vortex into two pieces, one North America, one Europe. So there's a kind of indication of something like that trying to be seen by the models here. But generally there is a very strong warming showing up, which is displacing and causing a lot of pressure on the polar vortex. Is this something to be very intrigued by, or is it something the models are going to step back on? That is going to be something that we'll only see as we move into the new year itself. Latest off the GFS regarding snow potential. Obviously, we're still a few days away, but it's certainly looking interesting in terms of as we move towards the early portions of next week, which is the final couple of days of the year. You can see here heavy snowfall over the Alps, the Pyrenees, into the southeast of Europe here, and also the north of the British Isles here. So generally about Aviemore northwards, we've got some snow starting to build up, and then that is going to extend further south. But we could see some really substantial snow as we step towards the Hogmanay and the 1st of January. Again, generally north of the central belt, but again, depends on the track and strength of the low as these systems move eastwards. It's not just one individual run. There's actually a couple of different lows that will swing eastwards. And then as these systems exit east, they allow the cold air to sink south here. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that Arctic air that's lurking on the north shore of Scotland to then start to drift south. It's only once these lows then move eastwards that opens the door further south. And we've got a fairly substantial snow cover, 21 UTC Wednesday, the 1st of January here, according to the model. And this is looking at the whole of Europe because it gets rather interesting as we move towards the end of next week and through the weekend. We start to really expand the snow cover across the continent. And if you look at the 850s, you can see why that's the case, because we actually have a bit of an easterly flow developing. This is the model run here for Tuesday, 7th of January. Again, you take this with a pinch of salt because we know there is many members of the same model that are showing slightly different outcomes. But this is certainly an intriguing situation developing here as we move forward through the next week or so. So there's an area of low pressure riding the boundary between the relatively warmer versus colder. Again, you're not really seeing much in the way of cold progressing much south of Inverness, really. So this is Monday 30th at the 12 UTC. Continue to play through. There's the main area of low pressure that is now starting to barrel its way across the northern half of the British Isles. Again, not an awful lot of cold through the central belt and points southwards. Because of the position of the low. It's the track that's critical. Further south that track is, the more snow in the northern flank, the more population gets involved in wintry precipitation as opposed to liquid. But it's once that system then moves eastwards, we've got that colder air moving through. Then we've got another system, quite a deep low at that, on New Year's Day, 0900 UTC. You can see a deep area of low pressure that moves south. We've got plenty of cold air, if you notice, encompassing Scotland. The reason why is that low is taking a slightly further south track, which means it keeps the likes of the central belt, for example, in colder air, which means that you would expect precipitation to be more of a wintry nature. Continue to play through this loop. We're all in the cold air by the time we reach Thursday, Friday of next week here, the first few days of January. And then we see even colder air starting to drift south as we move towards next weekend here. Notice here that we've got the slightly milder air to the west-northwest. There's that higher pressure, that Greenland block. And we may start to see, with higher pressure building to the north of the UK, that acts like a wheel with very cold air over the continent. That could get drawn underneath the high towards the UK and Ireland here. Look at these temperatures at 8:50, minus 10 Celsius or lower, then moving into the southern UK as we move towards the end of week 1 of January. But a long way out, and we know that things can change. But I want to show you, before we look briefly at the ECMWF to see what its solution is, I want to show you up close the snow potential in the coming days to come. So this is, let's look at the UK specifically, and snow, and see what it's showing here. We also have a wind threat, by the way, coming up, especially with that final low moving in into the kind of new year period itself. But again, wee bit away, so we'll look at that in more detail in the next few days. But look at this here as we play through the loop. This is off the GFS, like I say. We're really building the snow cover, especially over high ground, but I would say that's even low-level snow starting to pile up north of the Central Belt, generally towards the beginning of Hogmanay, Tuesday, 31st of December. And then as we see that next feature moving through slightly further south, it's going to start to see snow amounts piling up over the Central Belt, for example, southern Scotland, even the north of England, parts of Northern Ireland and the Northern Republic of Ireland, also seeing that significant snow. This is according to the GFS anyway. And then continue to play through. You can see the snow starting to pile up over the near continent as well. Generally, snow seems to be more across the north, but likely not exclusively so. Pinpointing the details at this far out is pretty much silly, to be honest with you, because we know there's going to be a lot of fluctuation and change. Let's have a quick look at the ECM run. Again, the snow starts off across the north, well to the north of the Central Belt. Then as we get another few features moving in further south, that then puts the Central Belt in the snow. And then as we continue to play through off the ECMWF model, we're starting to see more snow start to develop here. North Wales, parts of more widespread Ireland, Northern Ireland, and then even across more portions of England as well, we'll start to see the snow. But look at the north. That is quite a significant amount of snow piling up according to this run. Let's go back and view the bigger picture and look at the 850s and see what the model is indicating here with regards to the cold. So play through, we still have that boundary sitting generally in the far north of the UK. One area of low pressure moves through, then the next feature moves in. Some pretty cold air coming in from the north, as can be seen here. And like the GFS, we've got that area of high pressure close by, but acting as a wheel, drawing that bitterly cold air over the near continent, underneath and towards the southern half of the UK as we move towards the latter half of next week. So it's all to play for. Complicated situation developing here, but it looks as if the modelling is honing in more and more on some pretty cold conditions as we progress through next week, and potentially snowy as well. Like I said in the title of the video a couple of days ago, polar opposite compared to what we've seen during the Christmas period. So exciting stuff if you like snow and cold. Stay tuned. Hope you can join me for the 4 p.m. live stream tomorrow afternoon, and I'll be back then with more. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye for now.